we never really were ones for planning. Just buy a plane ticket or hop in a car.
Let's go, go, go.
We wouldn't spend hours online looking at TripAdvisor or plan out much at all. We just pack our bags and go.
Yep. See ya.
Which worked for us. Well, at least most of the time. There's always a chance that things would go drastically wrong. That the plan would fail or someone would get injured. But the not knowing was part of the fun.
This story is about a pilgrimage, a journey between friends, a story in which things didn't always go as planned. This story started 2 years ago. Fire lookout towers. They're spread across the west coast, seated on summits or high vantage points. Originally they were used to discover forest fires. People would take turns living in the towers for a few weeks during the fire season and look out for any signs of burning. But today many towers have gone into disuse and disrepair, with some of them now being rented out as Airbnbs for people to stay in for a few days. 2 years ago, I left for a journey to one of these towers in the harshest time of year. The dead of winter. Like our usual selves, we made the trip on a whim. The night before, I mentioned to David about wanting to summit a tower, and within the hour we had committed to going the following morning. It ended up being a grueling trip. We had 16 miles to hike with a 2,000-foot elevation change, minimal sunlight, and we were on a race against the clock to return our snowshoes on time. Yeah, the trip was pretty crazy, but it left a mark on our minds. 2 years later, we made good on our promise. But this time, we decided to step it up, so we called a few friends to tag along. Oh yeah, this was gonna be one of our biggest adventures yet. From miles apart, we made our way to Eugene, Oregon, where we would all meet at Brendan's house.
Hey, I'm here.
Alright, I'm coming to meet you. We're leaving sunny Los Angeles for freezing cold Oregon. You think that's gonna be under 40 pounds?
Your bag is overweight by 21 pounds.
Jesus. Alright, we're in LAX right now. We're gonna be in Oregon in 3 hours?
3 hours. 3 hours.
Perfect. Two years ago, the trip was so last minute, we decided to buy a drone with the full intention of returning it the following day.
Almost $1,400 for a drone. Here we go.
Today, we were a little more prepared.
What up?
Brendanowitz, they're here.
Alright, so me and my co-captain here, we're gonna go pick up Andrew and David. They've just touched down in Oregon.
Let's go, buddy.
From nothing, you don't need to.
Hey guys! Holy shit, that's huge!
Don't need to be rich. From nothing, you don't need to.
How was your last
one?
2 days ago. I've been here a while.
Show of hands, has anyone gone snowmobiling before?
Yes, I've been on the back of a snowmobile before. What I can tell you is that they're extremely scary and very cold.
I think where we're going is at the bottom, and then zoom out,
Holy shit.
Right there is Crater Lake, and the fire tower that we're heading to is right here. All together now in Eugene, I was weirdly reminded of the last expedition. The same feelings of excitement mixed with apprehension permeated the room as we discussed the long journey ahead of us. The only difference was now we had a few more people to keep us company. The day was finally here, and the conditions were worse than I expected. There was no sun shining in the sky like last time, no groomed paths to help us get to our destination. Well, I mean, at least we didn't have to hitchhike our way to the trailhead, but I'd trade dark clouds, endless snowfall, and below freezing temperatures for a little bit of hitchhiking any day. To my surprise, everyone else's enthusiasm to get to Crater Lake wasn't stifled.
Fucking beautiful here.
As we arrived at the rental place, my own confidence in our mission began to come back. I think this is very doable.
Yeah.
I was once again determined to make it to Crater Lake.
Signature on the card there. Your coffee and your card.
Thank you.
Do you think it's possible to get to Crater Lake today?
It's possible.
I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah. It just depends on how fast you go.
Okay, not really the response I was looking for, but by now I'm used to accomplishing what most people are skeptical about. This was not my first, second, or third time being in a situation like this. Crater Lake was just another test, and I was going to pass it. And hey, we had a map. That's more than we had last time. Sunshine, storm, whatever. It didn't matter. We were going to make it to this tower. With only 8 hours to ride over 120 miles, it was time to stop thinking and start doing. Unsurprisingly, snowmobiling was much more exciting than snowshoeing. These things tore through snow. What took us hours to snowshoe in the past now only took us a few minutes. Last time, the journey was tough. It was tiring. This time, I was having fun. As the day went on, the storm refused to let up. By now, the snow had seeped into our jackets and melted, leaving us cold and wet. To make things worse, the trails we were on weren't properly marked, and the maps offered little help into guiding us towards our destination. Like, come on, we're millennials, we use Google Maps, not physical ones. Things weren't looking good, so we pulled our snowmobiles over to talk. All right, everyone huddle up.
Alright, guys.
Team meeting.
So, here's the situation.
The facts were there even if I didn't want to admit it. It was unlikely we were going to make it to Crater Lake. I had spent days fantasizing and looking forward to this trip, but it was undeniable that traveling so far in such awful conditions was dangerous. 2 years ago, the danger wasn't so obvious. You see, Dave and I were almost to the tower. We could clearly see it looming above us. As we started the final ascent, we realized the snow had completely iced over, making the hill very slippery. And I kid you not, 2 feet from the tower, David slips and falls the entire length of the mountain. And all I can do is watch. After a short talk, we decided to wave the white flag on getting to Crater Lake. It was over. I had failed. We took shelter in a nearby lodge to warm ourselves and regroup. As the storm brewed outside, I felt shamefully responsible for how our trip had turned out. We had all invested time and money to come together for this adventure. Some of us had taken time off work and traveled far, and it was me who had taken care of all the planning and promised that we would make it to Crater Lake. But we didn't. Here is where the two journeys really diverge. 2 years ago, David and I actually made it to the top of the tower. We overcame tons of obstacles and summited the mountain after a grueling 16-mile hike, a 2,000-foot elevation change, and David's fall. In the end, all of our suffering paid off. I think much of this success led to my hunger for more. The trip was one of my best adventures to date, so naturally I wanted to scale things up. To me, the trip to Crater Lake was about closure. It was about bookending an incredible journey. Getting to that tower would write the last chapter. It would dot the I's and cross the T's. I would finally be able to hang up the cape and move on to bigger adventures. But sitting in that lodge, I realized I was wrong. As corny as it sounds, this trip wasn't about the destination. I mean, yeah, it would have been cool to make it to the fire tower at Crater Lake, but this trip was about much more than that. And as I looked outside, I saw the storm had died. Like a movie, the dark clouds had disappeared and were replaced with sunlight. So now, warm from the fire and a desire to finish the trip on a high note, we got back on our vehicles for one last ride of the day. So yeah, we didn't make it to Crater Lake, but our story isn't about that. Our story is about a group of friends separated by hundreds of miles coming together to quite frankly just hang out. At the risk of sounding like Disney, the trip was about our friendship. I guess it goes to show that when you have no plans, you have no expectations. And sometimes, by setting a plan, you are also setting yourself up for disappointment. But in the end, it comes down to your perspective on things and your outlook on how everything turns out. And okay, yeah, sure, you could say we failed. But to me, that just means we have to go back.
I got it all refunded. Oh my god. Pretty solid weekend. Sunburned. Oh jeez.